chimed in so far. There are some incredibly talented restoration sales professionals that bring a lot to the table. So looks like the participants are going up quite a bit. We're going to get started a couple, 3 minutes after, just to allow everybody to get in. But if you have just joined us, welcome. I know that you guys have been asking for another tier level webinar. We appreciate it. The response has been pretty overwhelming with the amount of people that had registered. So make sure you chime in and tell us who you are, where you're from. We're extremely glad to have you. And we're going to get started, like I said, a couple, 3 minutes after, just to allow everybody to come in.
And we just put a poll up as well. Just kind of, these are just a few of the pinpoints. What are some of the biggest obstacles that you have with sales in your current role, whether you're an owner, whether you're an actual sales representative of your company? Go ahead and click that right there. It kind of gives us a gauge on some areas to talk about and expand on during this presentation as well. So just go ahead and pick the one that you find is the biggest obstacle for yourself. And again, it's kind of anonymous, so nobody will see what you're picking, so don't worry about that. But go ahead and just start picking what those are. Understanding the sales cycle. I mean, it sounds very basic, but it can be very complicated to understand each level of that sales cycle, and skipping parts of them can have a negative impact. Getting contact information, scared to talk to people, how to approach and make contact in a pandemic, what questions to ask, no formal training. These are a lot of things that we hear ongoing that you might not be receiving locally or from your corporate office or something like that. So we definitely want to, kind of gauge what you guys are struggling with and what areas you find that you might have for most improvement.
Also, too, while everybody is still logging on, like I said, we still got just a couple minutes before we're going to get started. If you notice, you're seeing that this is being brought to you by Tier Level Digital Marketing as well as Restoration Sales University. If you feel like that any of the answers to those, understanding the sales cycle, how to get to the correct COIs. Right now it could be a combination of, I'm really kind of scared to reach out because I don't know how to approach people in the pandemic, what types of questions, probing questions you should be asking. Any of those, Sean and I saw, over having worked in this industry, that there was a big deficit in being able to get out there and get the appropriate information that you need to be successful. So therefore, we have Restoration Sales University, and we actually have a class coming up that is going to be October 19th through the 21st. You'll be on a flight home on the 21st. It's 2.5 days of very intensive training. And you can go to restorationsalesuniversity.com to register for that event. We do have just a couple of seats available. And if you really want game-changing training with peer-to-peer type best practices being shared, but really critical out of the box thinking, I encourage you to come. It's going to be in Broken Arrow. It's at a beautiful location. It's easy to get to, and it's going to be a really good time. And not by our admission, but by a lot of restoration owners and professionals that have attended this class, they say it is the most relevant sales training in restoration right now. So we would love to have you. So we'll start at 11:05 exactly, because we do still have people coming in. Make sure that you chime in who you are, where you're from, and welcome. And like I said, we've got quite a few people on here. That's exciting. We hope that you come away better than the way that you came, but we also too want to hear what's working for you. Like I said, I know there's some people on here that are extremely talented, that bring a lot to the table. They realistically could probably be teaching this themselves. So we're honored to have you guys on here and looking forward to your input. And we'll get started here in just a minute.
All right, Eddie, if you want to, can you see the results from the poll? Because it wanted to share that with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like right now, it looks like we've got Mike Hayden has chimed in. We've got Clayton. So how you doing, Clayton? It's good to have you on board. It looks like in the initial results so far, the biggest obstacle with sales it was overwhelmingly how to approach and make contact in the pandemic. We're going to address that. We're going to talk about how important it is to move into blended sales. That if you're not going to be in blended sales, you're really going to be beating your head against a wall. So without further ado, I'm going to let Sean introduce this, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so we're super excited to talk about this topic today on closing the deal, fire, water, mold, all things restoration. I know this has been a year like no other when, sales and being excellent at sales can be a challenge during a normal year. Well, now we have one of the biggest pandemics and just craziness in the world that we live in that has affected a lot of jobs and careers and things like that. But with anything that has a negative side to it, there's always an opportunity. And that opportunity is to be great, is to expand and to look for the right opportunities to capitalize on this for your career. And that's a lot about what we're going to talk about. A lot of it is very simple, but a lot of the things we're going to talk about today are things you should have been doing in normal times, which we can definitely say these are not normal times right now. So I think it's very, this is a time where you really have to get back to the basics of planning, strategically organizing, your approach and things like that, which we're going to kind of go through those basics of the sales cycle and so forth. But I'm super excited to be here with Eddie today. I'm the founder, CEO of Tier Level Digital Marketing, co-founder of Restoration Sales University. So we have a lot of passion for this industry, a lot like many of you on this call. It's super exciting to see you guys coming out to just want to continue to learn together. And we learn a lot from you guys too. So this is very rewarding for us to be a part of this as well. So Eddie, I'm gonna go ahead and let you take over from there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sean. As Sean said, he's a founder and CEO of Tier Level. I am the VP of Sales. Both of us had a pretty extensive background and we're blessed to have a lot of success in restoration, and a lot of it had to do with the out of the box thinking that we came up with. And so what we're going to do is we've learned several things throughout this pandemic, which is honestly a time for restoration professionals to be able to shine, because the pandemic involves infectious disease control. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but more importantly, we're going to talk about really that disconnect of how we are closing jobs on the water side, on the fire side, on the mold side, how we're able to get in front of those COIs, and we're going to deal with COVID-19. I think in order to do that, though, that it's going to be really important that we understand the basics. And, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is, do you honestly know the sales cycle? Sean had put this in. This is part of Restoration Sales University training. The first three things that you're going to see in the sales cycle are going to be red. And then the last four things that are going to be on there are going to be green. Sean, can you explain the differentiation between the two before we get into it?
Yeah, so when you're looking at red and green, it's obviously universal colors for stop and go. And what I really want you to get into your mentality is that when you're going through the first phases of the sales cycle, you should not be pushing or going at the person with what you're about. You should be focused on obtaining information. So what I like to visualize is that you stop. You do not talk about your organization. You do not talk about your company. You're specifically there to learn everything you can about that company, ask questions to get answers coming into you before you even get to your actual presentation of who you are and what you're about. So that's why I really like to use the color coding of red and green, because when you're going through these different levels, it is all about listening and observing information versus presenting or giving information. So that's kind of the simple prospect or process of the red versus green.
Absolutely. And I think that the pre-approach is probably one of the most neglected portions of the sales cycle. We talk about this, and you're going to see this on the next slide, about that most representatives will take and show up and throw up. And really what that means is, and if you guys can relate to this, then I want you to take note, because this is a very hard thing for salespeople to walk away from and change. And it's that they'll walk in with their business card in their hand, or their giveaways, or their marketing materials, and they want to say, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I do restoration, which includes fire, water, mold, and we would love to be able to have work from you." And they have not done any due diligence the night before to find anything out about the company that they're approaching. How long's that company been in business? How many employees do they have? What's their niche in the market space? Where would you potentially be a solution to any problem that they could potentially have, to where they're dominating the conversation, not you? So on the pre-approach, it's what we call pre-call planning. It's being able to go out there and garner information that you can use as a talking point to get the customer's walls to come down and be able to actually talk actively about their company. People want to talk most what they're passionate about. And, so if you understand that a gentleman has been, the COI, or the center of influence, has been there since, 2000, and he's got 20 years with the company. Well, he's been through some things. He's survived a recession. Maybe you ask him that question, is like, I see you've been here 20 years, Mr. COI. Tell me, how your company got through, 2008, 2009. What was it that caused you guys to be able to survive whenever other companies couldn't? And take notice of all the nonverbal things around the office, things that they may be interested in, whether it's sports teams, whether it's, it could be the arts, it could be all kinds of things. So the next thing on the sales cycle, and again, and this green part, the red part that we're talking about, means that you haven't even jumped into anything that you're about yet. So this is all still about the customer. So pre-approach, and then the approach. What exactly is it that you're wanting to accomplish in here whenever you're taking and going into this? What are your micro goals that you want to set for this meeting? And Sean has got a poll up about pre-approach. How much time a week do you spend working on your pre-approach research? Do you not do it at all? And be honest. Because if we're not learning, we're not growing. If you're not doing this, then by all means, please be honest about it. But, if you're a rock star, and I know there's a couple of you are, because I see your weekly agendas, I know that you're spending lots of time on this. So the next thing is going to be the needs analysis. This is where solution-based selling comes into play. It's not about you, it's about them. Now, all of a sudden, you see the light go green. Sean, why did the light go green here?
Because now we're getting to the point where we've obtained information from our research. We've obtained how we're going to initially connect with them to ask questions, which is part of that needs analysis process. Now, once we obtain all that information, we can customize and make our presentation tailored, unique, and specific to that individual client. Again, we offer hundreds of services when it comes to cleaning and restoration. It's not necessarily all a perfect fit for every client. So we have to look at those situations and unique situations that we can present to start to build that relationship. A lot of times, and Eddie will probably talk about this a little bit later, is there might be other things beyond restoration and cleaning that we're using to synergize that relationship, whether it's human trafficking awareness in the hotel industry, whether it's active shooter training for schools. These are a lot of minor certifications that you can get on the Department of Homeland Security and other credible certification sites that can just bring awareness and value. Or you could partner with the local police department to maybe do some of these things, the local fire department. There's a lot of organizations that you can kind of bring the entities together, but unless you ask specific questions, and asking a lot of questions is a good thing. You should rehearse, write down questions that you have in your arsenal at any given time, because even when you're going through the presentation, there might be some more questions if you're reading a bad vibe off the person you're presenting to, that center of influence, that you might need to go back and go back to, shut up and listen instead of, throwing up all over them. So it's very important that you hold back as long as you can to get all the information that you can obtain so you can actively and professionally present what you have to offer them.
Absolutely. And I think if you guys look, you really hadn't gotten into what anything that you had done or were about up until 4. So a lot of times we walk in on this pre-approach or even on the approach, and we're already into our presentation whenever we really don't have any business being there at all. We haven't established any sort of trust foundation. We have not asked them anything that was going to be potentially about them or what kind of a solution. And then next you have validation, but what have you still not seen? You still have not seen that it is the appropriate time to close. This even works in a potential priority response situation. You still do have pre-approach, approach, needs analysis, presentation, and validation before you ever close. More often than not, we either don't close or we close too soon and it doesn't make any sense. So whenever you ask for the business, the customer is completely floored because they have no idea why you're asking for the business, because you haven't given them any reason to buy at this point. And so we will, kind of get into there. So now at the sixth step in the cycle is where we get to closing. This is where we actually ask for the business. And then the last thing is going to be your follow-up and engagement. All relationships require communication to be successful. And so our relationships thrive on communication. So if you think you're going to go in, say, for example, it's an ERP situation, you're going to do the ERP, you're going to shelf it and expect somebody to call you 3 years down the road because you haven't done any follow-up. Guess what? The competitor is going to be doing the job. The most successful restoration relationships are just that. You need to know what they require. Give you a perfect example. I had one relationship that the facilities manager told me, I don't need you to take me to lunch. I don't need you to take me to dinner. I don't need you to drop by trinkets or calendars or any of these kinds of things. I just need you to answer your phone when you call, and I don't need to be babysat. So I still would touch base with him about once a quarter, and inevitably his communication back to me was no news is good news. But he knew I was there, but I identified what would you need, in a relationship with me. And he goes, to not be like everybody else. Don't think you got to wine me, dine me, woo me, all of these kinds of things. Just answer your phone whenever. And sure enough, we partnered with this gentleman, and when he had a big loss, we answered the phone, we were there, and it ended up being a fantastic relationship moving forward. So here's the
Hey, Eddie, real quick.
Yeah.
I put a quick poll up about, this goes back to needs analysis, but it can carry through the sales cycle. But I asked how many of you have a list of 30 or more questions written down that you have ready to ask any potential client at any given time, and 92% of you don't. Now, I'm not trying to dog on you guys or put you down about this, but this is a very important, a very simple tactic. To write down questions you've asked, but to have that in front of you every day, laminated in your notebook, in your planner, whatever. These questions, we've been in meetings where we've asked 15, 20, 30 questions before. So 30 is just a minimum list. But if you don't know the questions to ask, how are you going to fulfill the sales cycle? How are you going to know more about your clients without just being a push marketer salesperson? So I think this is a very good wake-up call for all of us, and I'm guilty of this. I even day to day, sometimes I don't just have a list of the questions for whatever particular project I'm working on or client I'm working with, but where are we at? Like, why do we not have this? This is something that would take 5 to 10 minutes to write down, type up, that could dramatically impact your business and your pipeline. This is the difference when you get to being an ultra high performer or a mediocre salesperson. So I definitely think you guys need to take a hard look inside and find ways. If you need help with this, feel free to email myself and Eddie. We have some questions we used to use back when we were in the field. We can definitely help you with that. So, and Kelly Malloy just wrote, one of the questions I have to prospective clients, what is most important to you? That's great, but what are 5, 10, 15 other questions that can dig deeper with that one question that you can keep a conversation rolling? So again, great question, Kelly, and definitely expand on that, add more to that so you can build a deeper relationship when you're prospecting.
Absolutely. And more often than not, whenever we're in the field, Sean and I are blessed to do a lot of consulting. And we actually go out into the field with the reps and observe a lot of presentation styles. And more often than not, we find that it is just almost commonplace that people just show up and throw up. And I get tired of using this terminology, but it is true. It is, hi, we are this, whether it's PureClean, Service Master, Harborough, ATI, Interstate, ServPro, whoever. They show up and say, this is what we can do. This is who we are. This is what we have accomplished. This is why you need to use us. And not once did they ever say, what would you need from somebody like me? And there's a big difference, and we're going to get into that on the next slide. But you need to be a consultative, solutions-based salesperson. Every business, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a disaster happens. And you need to understand their intimate needs that they would have from having a relationship with an organization like yours. So you tailor the things that you bring to the table around their specific needs with apples to apples stories. So if it was, say, for example, Sean owned a hotel, and I was to come in, I would be asking questions that would be centered around what would keep him up at night. Tell me about the things that really worry you about this business. And more often than not, you'll find when you ask questions like that they will say, we're scared to death that something's going to happen and our employees aren't going to be able to clock in. Think about how applicable it is right now with COVID. Think about where this plays into that. What are the big fears? The big fears are that one of these restaurants, one of these hotels, one of these places of business are going to have a confirmed case and it's going to shut them down, and they can't do anything about it. What solutions do you provide? You provide the fact that you are masters of infectious disease control. If you're having a janitorial company come in and do cleanings on an identified case, these people aren't certified in infectious disease control. And you guys have been dealing with this for years and years and years. You guys have been doing MRSA cleanups, HIV, bloodborne pathogen, staph infection, TB. I mean, you guys have done infectious disease control. This is no different. So now at this point, whenever they give you what their fears are, now you need to be consultative. Mr. So-and-so, Mr. COI, I can completely understand why that would bother you. And you know what? You have made the right choice in sitting down with me because I have solutions to those specific problems. But if we're showing up and saying, this is what we do, this is who we are, we're the biggest, we're the best, we're the fastest, maybe that doesn't, now you're just throwing darts at a map hoping something is going to stick. That's not selling. That's telling. Selling is listening. Selling is being consultative. Selling is being solutions-based. Selling and here's where the big epiphany is going to come, is you're a giver. And we're going to get into that on the next slide. Sean, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, that's perfect. I like that a lot.
So here's the deal. Do you want to sell more people? Be a giver, not a taker. If you show up and you've been beating your head against a wall with these people, trying to close business, close a relationship, and all you have done is talk about fire, water, mold, then you are the true definition of an insanity. You're not finding alternative ways to win. You're not finding hot buttons by asking the right directed, pointed questions to be able to understand where do you fit in their relationship. Because you don't want to be a vendor. You want to be a strategic partner for their success. You want to be focused on their business continuity. If you're doing predominantly commercial sales, that is the one hot button. That is what is going to make their ears perk up. How do you keep them in business throughout a disaster? So A taker is going to say, listen, this is what I can do for you. This is what ServPro can do for you. This is what ServiceMaster. This is what JGB. This is what Harborough. This is what AdvantaClean. This is what PuraClean. This is what we can do for you. A giver said, what would you need from me? Now you've switched from being a salesperson to a servant. Just by a small paradigm shift in the way that you present. What would you need? Well, just like I said, I was up, I'm not even going to say who or where. I was up at a very affluent resort that the salesperson had garnered a meeting with, and they kept talking about ERPs and kept talking about, here's what we can do, here's what we can do, here's what we can do. And he was not watching the countenance of the person that he was presenting to. Person was pushed away from the desk, arms folded, totally disengaged, waiting for him to stop talking so he could respond. And when he stopped talking, he said, none of that interests me. He goes, we have guys on site 24/7. He goes, ERP is not, which if you guys are with an industry that does, or with a company that doesn't know what the ERPs are, they're emergency ready profiles. We can talk about those another time, but they're invaluable for business continuity planning. And the situation is that the guy just wasn't buying anything that the guy was presenting. And he just kept pushing it and kept pushing it. And there's a difference between push and pull. And I'm going to let Sean talk about that right now before we finish this story. Sean, define the difference between a push marketer and a pull marketer, or a push salesperson and a pull salesperson.
Yeah. So, when you understand the difference between sales and marketing, that's always a huge objective, because I know a lot of you are given a title like, I'm a marketing representative of my company, but your main job is to sell. But and you have to understand the difference between that. Like, marketing is things more about branding and brand awareness and things like that. But when you get into the concept of push versus pull, you all know those salespeople that are, and you call them, oh, they're really pushy. And so many times you don't notice that you're becoming that pushy person. And it's something that people do not like. I mean, just relate to yourself when somebody tries to push you something like a new car, or you walk into a furniture store and you're being pushed and pushed and pushed when they don't even have a clue what you're looking for and what you like. They're just trying to put products and services right in front of you. So it's very when you look at that analogy of push versus pull, what are you doing to pull them into you? And the most effective way to pull them into you is by asking specific questions. Those questions are going to hit those pain points that allow you to ask more in-depth questions to start that conversation. When that conversation starts, then there's trust is beginning to be built. There is confidence that you might know what you're talking about. So then when you get to a point of presenting and laying out what you have on the table, it's more tailored to actually understanding what they're looking for. So, you really have to visualize that. Are you pushing somebody to do business with you? Or are you pulling them into you? Are you attracting them to you to want to do business with you?
Yeah, I think that, more often than not, if we really take a look at the presentation styles that we go out there as restoration professionals, there's two things that we don't understand. Really, one, we're not selling anything. Unless we're in a priority response situation where it's an immediate gratification vertical like duct cleaning or floor polishing or structure cleaning or things like that, then at that point you are actively selling. But for the most part, what we're doing is building a foundation for a relationship that is going to be so solid that when something finally does happen, you are first and foremost on their mind. You are memorable. And what is your differentiator? What makes you memorable? So coming back to that story, the taker was, look, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then he wasn't using active listening skills to say, the guy was like, look, I'm not interested. So he didn't try to find an alternative angle. As long as they're engaged in conversation, then they're interested in something that you have to say. So don't just take that first objection. We should expect those objections and be ready for them. If they just say yes right out of the gate, it was too easy and there's something else wrong, because you're trying to go from 0 to trust in a matter of, 3 inches here. And, so he wasn't actively listening to what the customer's saying. And I finally just said, sir, if you don't mind me asking, I've heard you say, that you wouldn't be interested in anything like this. I said, what would you expect from a company like us? What would you be looking for? And he said the same thing. He goes, honestly, just answer your phone and be here when you say you're going to be here. And I said, what kind of time frame would you be looking at? Because we live right down the street. I can literally be here in 10 or 15 minutes when you call me. So we gave a 30-minute time frame, which was acceptable to him. It was all he wanted. So when we walked away, I looked at the sales rep and I said, what did I do differently? And he said, you asked him what he wanted. And really, that's all it boiled down to. I became a giver. I said, I want to find out, what is your problem? What is your pain point? What are the things that keep you up at night? And how can I be a solution to that? How can I help give you peace of mind?
Hey, Eddie, quick question for you. Tracy Burrows up in Scarsdale wanted to know, what sales tips can you provide for your virtual Zoom introduction for a healthcare engineer COI?
Okay, fantastic. So as far as virtual Zoom, I think that anytime that you're going to boot, and we'll kind of just jump into this, there's not really a slide on this because this is predominantly about closing, but let's talk about the 3 facets of what it takes to be a successful blended salesperson. First off, if you have not picked up the book Virtual Selling by Jeb Blunt, I strongly recommend that you do that. Secondly, if you did not watch Sean and I's webinar on virtual selling, make sure you request it by email and we'll send you a link to that webinar for virtual selling. So Tracy brings up a very good point because she is talking about true blended sales. True blended sales, you have to be good on 3 facets now to be successful in this modern day. You have to be good, A, on the phones, B, digitally, and C, face-to-face. And they all work in cohesion. So if you're looking, so first off on the phones, you're going to have a lot of success on the phones. People are captive audiences now, but it requires a lot more active listening, a lot more control over your inflection, your tone, to be able to create excitement in what you're doing. But whenever you're going to approach, say, a healthcare professional to talk to them about like a hospital engineer, about what you're going to want to talk to on a Zoom meeting, which is going to be the digital facet for blended sales, you're going to want to get into the same conversations that you would face to face, and be very respectful whenever you're making that introduction and say, look, I understand with everything going on with the pandemic, you probably go ahead and address the elephant in the room. You probably most likely don't want to meet face to face. I'm more than happy to jump on a Zoom phone call with you because I've got some very important things that I would like to speak to you about that can help protect your hospital. And you're going to want to utilize terms that are going to hot buttons that are going to make them want to jump on that call with you. So what services do you provide that can help protect the hospital? You provide cleaning if they need the cleaning. Most restoration companies have went and gotten their ICRA certification, so you can emphasize that. If you do not have that, it's something you're going to want to have if you're going to work in a hospital clinic and a clinical environment. ICRA is an infection control. It's a 40-hour CE course that can be done online. And I've seen restoration companies actually get booted for not having off of jobs for not having their ICRA certification. But most importantly, what, Tracy, I know the company you work for, what do you have that is one of the biggest things that hospitals, churches, school systems love? It's the ERP. And you need to talk to them in the presence of that. It is a business continuity planning tool. So if you want to get into some more specific verbiage, let's chat one-on-one. You've got my contact information. Let's set up a time to talk to show you how to break that bubble. But, think about the things that you guys have that would be hot buttons. Hospitals especially need to know that you understand the sterilization protocol, the specific HIPAA requirements, ICRA certification, and time. Time is of the essence. They want things done very quickly. So that's going to be the things that you are going to do.
Hey, Eddie, Josh asked for the names of the certifications you mentioned again.
ICRA, so ICRA, it's an infection control certification that most hospitals, cancer treatment centers, clinics are requiring to go in, especially if they have mold issues. They do have to require a higher level, higher standard of cleaning. So they're starting to become a little more stringent on that certification. And just as a caveat, as a side note, the best way to be able to find out what these people need is be involved in their speak. And that would be your state's association of hospital engineers, and get involved in that and be able to find out what their specific needs would be.
Somebody also just asked, is the training similar in Canada? I don't personally know. I know Clayton Berry is familiar with some Canadian guidelines. Clayton, if you wanted to jump in and answer that with the hospitals, I'm not sure what certifications, unless you've heard, Eddie, but I'm not familiar.
Yeah,
with
I have not. I can't speak intelligently to that. So Clayton, if you want to chime in on the chat portion, if you happen to have answers to those questions, we definitely welcome those.
And
okay, well, Clayton says he doesn't know. So I tell you what, I will do due diligence and find out the answer to that question, Matt. And we'll have that over to you. I think since you registered, I actually have your email, but if you want to email me personally, eddie@tierlevel.com, I will have an answer for you by end of business today.
Thanks, Clayton.
Yep. So the next thing is that what you have to understand is in the close is that this is where most people shy away from this. They don't ask for the business. You're true marketers by definition, which means that you want the relationships, but you'll take them to lunch, you'll take them golfing, you'll take them the trinkets and treats and all of these things, whether it's agent centric or commercial centric, but you don't ever ask for the business. And let me tell you something, if you don't ask for it, they're not going to give it to you. They're going to continue to take your gifts, and then you're going to wonder why in the world you are why competitors are getting the work, why insurance agents are still referring to other people. And it's because we haven't taken the time to stop and say, like during a lunch, and say, you know what, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to go do this, but we really need to talk about why we're here. And transition that conversation into business related conversation and say, you know what do I need to do to ensure that I get your next loss? I'm just asking for one. I'm not asking you to marry me on the first date here. I understand that, it's going to take me doing some things to establish trust. I just want the next one. And if I don't do it right, don't ever call me again. Are we being that transparent with customers? Are we being that upfront with them and asking them and saying, what's it going to take, for me to be your next phone call? If I'm going to tell you, and we'll get to this in sales psychology and a couple slides down the deal, but there are systems that you can put in place to ensure that your next answer is yes. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But closing, in my opinion, is the most important part of the sales process whenever you are engaged with the COI through the first 1, 2, 3 validation meetings. It is definitely, you have to ask for that business. It's also too where over 60% of sales professionals fail because the close scares them. They're terrified of it. And I've watched them skirt around the issue, but won't actually ask for it. But also too, maybe they close too early and it doesn't make sense. And the customer has no idea why you're asking for the business because you haven't established a need or a solution. So know when to close. Have you completed those first 5 steps of the sales process? Don't be counting them in your head. Okay, I'm here. You need to rehearse this with your peers, with your managers until it just rolls off your tongue. You know where you're at all the time in the sales process. Make sure, and also too, be positive assumptive. And so exactly what that means is that if Sean was the hotelier and I have talked to him and identified solutions that I can be to him, and he likes the ERP, I'm not going to say, would you like us to do this? I'm going to say, when would you like me to do this? Next Tuesday or Wednesday? I'm going to automatically assume the next answer is going to be yes. Well, you have to work off that 80-20 rule. 80% of the people in this world are sheep. And that's not meant as any disrespect. It just means that they follow where 20% of the leaders will take them. You're the 20% as salespeople. Take them where you want them to go. Control the conversation. Be positive, assumptive. Tell them when you're going to do it, not when is good for them. They'll tell you if those days aren't good for you, if they're not good for them. They're going to tell you. But most people are 80%. Most people are going to say, Wednesday. And you're going to end up with that market share. So this is something that I created, something that I said all the time. And so you get a little bit of me in this. And, you don't want people to tell you no. So if your presentation and your value proposition has to be geared so that the solutions that you have provided for the individual's needs make so much sense that it would utterly be ridiculous for them to tell you no. So I want you to stop and let that sink in. Your presentation has to make so much sense, because all the solutions that you have provided based on your fact finding, the validation that you have done, that it's genuinely going to be stupid for them to tell you anything other than yes. So Sean, what does that mean to you? If somebody was to come and to sit down and talk with you, what would that statement mean in your words?
Well, it really comes down to preparation. And this is why when you look at the sales cycle, uh, when you start skipping steps, like you stop doing the research, you stop doing the pre-call planning, the actual how you're going to approach them, writing down those questions, which many of you, we were able to get through polls. We're not writing those down. It's kind of like anything else in life. The more you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it. So if you go through every presentation and every prospect half-ass, you're going to get half-ass results. And this is why we see so many salespeople in the restoration industry like a revolving door. But there's a nice percentage of people, I'm sure it's not very high, that have done extremely well, that have generated over $1 million in revenue per year, and are building a career in this industry when everybody else just kind of goes and comes and goes and comes. This industry, the opportunity is there. It is 100% there. And what that means is, I mean, look at the pandemic we've been in. A lot of restoration companies are on track or above where they were last year if they have a sales team and a marketing team in place. With that said, if you are struggling right now, this is where you really have to go back to the drawing board and say, wow, what are we not doing in this cycle? Because you're like, yeah, I've tried that. But like, no, are you trying it every time you go out? Because I know when I'm presented by somebody that wants to sell me something, the more research they do on my company, myself, what I like, what I don't like, and we go through that process, I'm more likely to engage in a transactional purchase with them. So you really have to go back to the fundamental basics. Are you doing your pre-approach? Are you approaching effectively? With that mean Zoom? Does that mean in person? Does that mean phone calls? Does that mean emails? Does that mean text messages? Whatever that is, are you doing that effectively? Are you asking those right questions? Are you planning those questions in your mind, on paper, on your computer, on your phone, so you can have them ready to go like that? When you hesitate and you skip little steps here and there, that's what makes this reality of them saying, no. I mean, it should be, like Eddie said, ridiculous for them to tell you no, because you've done so much work. And it works every time. So I highly recommend, don't skip the steps. Don't, coast through this like it's just going to be a routine and you're going to get it. No, make it uniquely specific for every client. Then you're going to find your massive prospect list is really going to be narrowed down because you're having such great relationships and work coming from a core group of people that you've put that work into.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about sales psychology, and then we'll get into a little bit of specifics on, water, fire, mold, and COVID-19, and some scenario-based stuff. And we're going to really open the panel up for scenario-based questions. But sales psychology 101 is there's the art of the 3 yeses in sales, which means that if you ask 3 consecutive yes questions, you have a higher than 80% probability of the answer to your 4th question being a yes. So when you come down, this is the validation portion of where you're at before you ask for the business. And this is where you will see that it becomes utterly ridiculous for them to tell you no. And these are just examples. So you could say you had mentioned that it would give you more peace of mind knowing who to call when an emergency happens rather than just going to Google or the phone book or things like that, right? And they say yes. And say, well, okay, fantastic. And you would also agree that it would be a much better scenario for you to call a person like myself, rather than an office, because when an emergency happens, because of response time, I'm going to get there quickly. You're going to speak to somebody who's going to understand your problems. Absolutely. Yes, it would. You had stated that having, and this is if your company does this, an emergency ready profile in place could be used as a great training tool for your staff. Yes. Okay. And if the whole goal was to sell the ERP, I have next Tuesday or Wednesday available for you to come do the ERP. What day is best for you? Why would they tell you no? There's no reason. They've answered yes. You've identified what their problems were, what keeps them up at night, how you can be a specific solution. They're going to feel stupid telling you no, because they've just said yes to every single problem that they presented to you. You had a solution for. So what's the outcome? Scheduled ERP, check. That was the goal. Relationship started, check. You've done everything that you wanted to do. So sales psychology 101, have those 3, be taking notes whenever you're in your presentation so that when you get to the validation, you have 3 yes questions loaded and ready to go. And then operate on that principality of when you close, it would be ridiculous for them to tell you no. So whenever we get in, so let's talk a little bit about specifics. Let's talk about closing, water, fire, mold, COVID-19, priority responses. Okay. It's really not as difficult as you're making it out to be. You increase your odds by having more relationships, for one. That can be across the board, water, fire, mold, COVID. The more relationships you have, the more you increase your odds. So you've got to get out and you've got to hustle. You've got to get on the phones and do phone time. There's a gentleman on here right now that I put on my podcast about blended sales that I think right now is probably one of the most brilliant guys in blended sales right now. His name's John Fierco. And this guy's averaging 60 to 80 calls a week, phone calls a week, setting up Zoom meetings and meeting people face to face. And he is just the epitome of what a blended salesperson looks like. I would love to connect you with him. You can go listen to his podcast if you want. It's on Selling People, Not a Process. It's on iTunes and Spotify and iHeartRadio and all those places. So go listen to it. I think it was episode 52 or 53 on blended sales. But understand also, too, how to effectively communicate the science of what you do and why you do it. This comes to Sean and I's mantra of out care plus out educate equals out sell. And Sean, I want you to talk a little bit about exactly what that means.
Yeah. So when you really look at the humanizing component of sales and marketing in general, and when you have a mentality to out care, out educate, there is so much value in that proposition that you can really get beyond the BS of, wow, like this person's not just selling a product or service, but you have to be really passionate about what you're doing. You have to understand what you're really doing so you can provide that educational value. When you go through motions and things like that, people's BS radar is very strong nowadays. I mean, they can pick up on that extremely quick. But when you look at a business and you ask questions to get to know about their business, their problems, their livelihood, and you can provide education, it's very hard for people to compete with that in general. And it doesn't happen in necessarily the first meeting, but when you show back up, when you say you're going to show up, when you follow up with things that you're going to follow up with. Now we all drop the ball sometimes because we get busy and things like that happen. But the more, even when you do drop the ball, when you follow up with that and say, "I'm sorry, I meant to get this to you," that caringness of just being caring it makes all the difference in the world. And when you out care, out educate collectively together, it's really at the point where you start to outperform your competition. And it's just a basic human need. People want to be educated when it comes to something. They don't want to be sold. They need to be educated. And when you do that with a genuine heart and that caring passion comes through, that's when you really start to click those relationships.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you guys a real quick story on this and why, and it's going to jump down to the COVID-19 aspect of it. Why these big box franchise companies didn't come out of the gate roaring with this, being on the forefront whenever COVID-19 started, I have no idea. But I sat down with a CEO of a 20 facility ownership group for assisted living. And I said, now I want you to understand, I have a vested interest in the assisted living community because both my parents live in assisted living. And my dad has pulmonary fibrosis, which means that COVID would be a death sentence for him. He just wouldn't have the lung capacity to be able to make it through it. So I have a real heart and affinity for that vertical. So I sat down with an ownership group that had 20 assisted living facilities and was trying to sell COVID-19 cleanings for a restoration company. And, it was just, they had all the chemicals that they needed. Their staff was doing it. They're trained in infectious disease control too. And so I just point blank asked them the same thing. I said, what is your biggest concern with this COVID thing? And they said, we cannot stop the spread in our environment because we can't control how the employees, what they're doing after hours, and they may be carriers and coming back in here, and then one person gets it and it infects the whole wing. And right now we're looking at like 50 to 60% infection rate in our facilities. And I said, I may have a solution for that. And the person that I was talking to, the COI, said, well, I'm all ears if you do. I said, what's your occupancy rate on average in these assisted living facilities? They said, oh, about 60 to 70%. I said, so could you move the population around and dedicate like one wing to just that wing being open? And they said, well, yeah, of course, it would give us, like 8 rooms. And I said, what if we take an identified case, as soon as they test positive and we move them down there, we will create negative air with the HEPAs and the Phoenix Guardians and set up containment with an isolation containment chamber for the nurses to be able to change into the appropriate PPE. And we'll start isolating these positive cases until they either pass away or until they receive 2 negative tests before reintroducing them back into the population. We can leave this as an open-ended contract. They said, what would that cost? What would that look like? Well, we ran the numbers, and with 2 HEPA 500s, containment, a Phoenix Guardian, it was going to equate to around $3,000 a month. And all the restoration company had to do was go set the containment, check it once a week to make sure that it wasn't compromised and make sure that the machines were running, and set it up much the way mold containment would be. They not only said, we want to do it, they said, when can you get this done in all 20 facilities? And it ended up being an open-ended contract for $3,000 a month per facility. And they reduced their infection rate by over 80%. So what was the solution? Was the solution the commission check, or was the solution reduce the infection rate? The solution was reduce the infection rate, build trust. Why restoration companies didn't come out with this right out of the gate, I have no idea, being masters of infectious disease control. But that doesn't have anything to do with fire, water, mold. It didn't have anything to do with COVID-19 cleanings, but it was a solution that we had the ability to provide. And the only way you find that is to outcare. I care enough to find out why we need to work together. I'm going to educate you enough to make a decision that is going to be a solution to your specific problem. And that equaled a signed contract, which would be the selling portion of what it was. But that was not the goal. The goal was to work together, strategically partner to be a solution. Look at fire. Are you showing up on a priority response fire and talking about educating the consumer on the fact that they need to get perimeter fencing up and board up and tarping to make sure that they reduce their liability? We can talk, if you want to wait until the adjuster gets here for the stabilization to tear out all of that, I totally understand, but you need to get this structure secured to prevent contents from being stolen, to make sure that there is no liability for somebody stumbling in there and you have a claim on your insurance for somebody that got injured because they were curious. Are we doing that type of education? Mold, are we sitting down and talking about, look, here's the why you need to use our company to mitigate this? You don't just want to go in there with a rag and some bleach and try to do this. It all comes down to sitting down and taking the extra 5 to 10 minutes to explain the why to a customer. If you start with the why, they are more inclined to trust you. Okay, so you've listened to us talk. I'm going to open this up. We've got just a few minutes. We can go as long as you want. What questions or scenarios do you have that you don't have answers to? And if you don't want to do them on here, let's schedule a one-on-one. Let's talk. I've got time. Sean has time, because here's the deal. We care about you and your success. We care. That's why we do this. This isn't about us. This isn't about, hey, ooh, look at tier level. It's or look at Eddie and Sean. This is because we want to make a difference in your life. We want you to go achieve the success that you've only dreamed about. That's why we do this. We care about you.
Well, feel free to ask questions, like even specific situations you might be dealing with. You don't have to use exact names if it's a client you're trying to protect or something like that. But, real situational things are, struggles that you have. A lot of you said, what areas of the sales cycle are you losing focus on or missing out on? Feel free to share that. Somebody just asked, how do we schedule one-on-one? Just email myself or Eddie. Eddie at tierlevel.com or Sean at tierlevel.com. We have it up on the screen right now. And then we'll usually set up Zooms like this if you want to go more in detail with some situations that you're having locally. But feel free to put your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box on the screen as well. And just so you guys know, Eddie talked about earlier, we are in 2 weeks having Restoration Sales University here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I just put a poll up. If you are interested in learning more about it, feel free. We'll kind of give you more of a insight on that because it's very limited. I think we only have about 4 or 5 seats left for this class, but we are going to have more classes coming up. So this has been an extremely it goes very deep in this very beneficial class. We have very high performers that have attended down to some entry level, and they've all seemed to get a ton of value out of that. But feel free to go ahead, put your questions in there. You guys are quiet today.
Well, hopefully that means that we did a good job at explaining. So let's see, due to COVID, so Mindy had asked if we can do Restoration Sales University via Zoom. We are not going to be doing this class via Zoom, but Sean and I are excited that Restoration Sales University is going to become an e-curriculum site that you guys will be able to go purchase individual pods, entire classes, things like that. It is something that is in the works for 2021. We're super excited about it. and can't wait to launch it. So
Yeah, and that's something it wasn't just like putting a camera up and shooting it. We want to try to make it as interactive and possible using video technology. So we're actually working on different platforms right now and camera equipment to actually do that. So it's definitely stay tuned for that. But I mean, these one-on-ones we do, I mean, we definitely give our time to do these. So don't feel bad about asking if you just need some pointers or a lot of times it could be one little thing that could enhance things for you, and we want to make sure that we provide any of that value. But like we said earlier, when you're setting up Zoom meetings, one of the biggest things I've seen when it comes to setting up virtual meeting is just asking for the virtual meeting. Like as sales reps, sometimes you automatically assume that people are going to say no, and you haven't even asked. And it's unbelievable when you say, hey, can I send you a Zoom link? I'd love to ask you some questions. How people are so willing to do that, especially right now in the midst of this pandemic. So, definitely something that you can definitely, don't be scared to ask those questions to get that out there.
So Brittany just asked, said I'm new and started during COVID-19, so I haven't been able to go out and do routes. Since things are starting to open up, I'm not sure what questions I should be asking. First off, Brittany, I think it's probably, I need to know whether or not you are going to be more residentially or agent centric versus commercially centric, because your questions that you're going to be asking and value propositions that you'll be presenting will be substantially different. Those two are very unique verticals to be able to go after. So if just a high point would be if 30,000 foot view, that if you're going out, like to agents, I would ask them point blank and say, what do you like about the companies that you're currently referring work to? And if you could change anything about the way that they have been doing work for you, what would it be? And start to find chinks in the armor of how you can position yourself without maligning your competition. I'm going to tell you right now, if you talk bad about your competition, you're not a real salesperson. We are colleagues, and that's why people have such a bad emphasis or have a bad perception of this industry, is because we all walk around and talk bad about each other, and it's not necessary. Let your work speak for itself. So, if an agent tells you, Kelly wanted to say that they don't refer, then I think it's your job to really kind of call them on the carpet and educate them, because they are truly doing a disservice to their client base. I actually had this conversation when I was up in Philadelphia a couple months ago. Walked in with sales rep, and they said the first words out of their mouth, they said, "We send everything to claims. We don't refer work to restoration professionals." And I said, well, if you don't mind me asking, I said, how do you guys bonus at the end of the year off your loss ratio? I've said, if everything's a claim, I said, your loss ratio must be tremendous. And I said, secondly, I said, if you start that claim train down the tracks, you can't back it up. I said, so you're really doing a disservice to your customer. Well, we refer work to this one guy that we trust. And I said, oh, well, what do you like about it? I said, do you feel like, is there anything that he's doing that you would want to change? And they told me. And whenever we walked out, we ended up getting the referral work moving forward, just because of the educational process that we did. But I wasn't going to be deterred. That's what's called, Kelly, that's what's called a red herring objection. A red herring objection happens very early in the presentation to try to send you down a rabbit trail, to try to derail you. I have a outline of what objections are and where they occur in the presentation and how to overcome them, that I would be happy to send to you, so that you can recognize them for what they are and what they truly mean to the presentation. A lot of times they're just trying to derail you and try to see if they can fluster you. So I would be more than happy to send that out to you so that you can kind of look at where objections occur and how to overcome them. So Kelly, if you'll do me a favor, email me, Eddie@tierlevel.com. I'll send you over that sheet about the objections, and I think it'll help you out. So Brittany, let's do this, because I know that can be a pretty expansive topic to go on, do me a favor, Brittany, and email me. Since you're new, you're my favorite kind of person to talk to, because you're one of those people that we can really get some great communication and dialogue going, because you really don't have a lot of bad habits to break. And so email me, and let's set up a one-on-one, and let's make you successful. Let's really give you the tools that you need in your arsenal. My pleasure.
And,
So
and
Sean, anything else?
yeah, just so you guys know, like this is, you know, it takes years to learn some of these things, and the best way you're going to learn is by doing it, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes. So don't act like you have to go out to this level of perfection. Just start following the right habits in the sales cycle and everything that you're doing, and you start those habits, you're going to enhance them. They're going to become natural movements in your day-to-day life, because once you focus on a habit, it becomes a habit, and then you can start to make those things. But get rid of those bad habits that are holding you back, whether it's being lazy with research or just not putting the extra work into something. I mean, that little bit of extra will definitely make a difference. And I think it's so many times, if you just sit back, take out a sheet of paper, map out your day, create that one sheet for your life, for your day, for your week, however that looks, you really start to develop a system and structure for yourself that will be more effective. So, don't, you guys go out there and you start doing some of these things, you hit a wall, let us know. We'll help coach you through that. We've seen a lot of mistakes. We've made a lot of mistakes. We've lost a lot of sales. We've gained a lot of sales. But, I can tell you, from every sale we lost, we always evaluated what could we have done to get it.
That's
And
right.
it definitely has made us sharper, and helped us win other deals in the future. So, again, this is a year like this year, where me and Eddie are learning new things as we go right now. It's just like, many of you that have been in the industry for a long time, this is something like we've never seen before. So, it's a great time for a community of sales professionals to come together and share best practices and things like that. So, anything that you guys have that's working, we would love to, learn from you guys as well and share that with our community as well.
Absolutely. Well, guys, if you do not have more questions, like, Sean and I aren't trying to sell you anything. We just want the restoration presented in the best possible light. And we hope that you guys come away better than the way you came in. So it's our honor and our pleasure to be able to share what we with. Hope that it makes your goals and objectives. But thank you so much for everything, and thank you for attending our webinars. And we'll have another soon. So, anything else you want to
Have a great day, and we'll send the replay out this afternoon for you guys.
be blessed? And we'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.